Hey, it's Matt Storms. In a previous video, I went through the top 13 mistakes of emerging tech-based companies. In this video, what I'm going to do is talk more in depth about mistake number 3, failing to vest founder shares or failing to do so appropriately. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I've seen. The first example, there was a group of 3 founders that created a company and they decided to do their equity split. They raised some capital from friends and family, roughly $1 million worth of capital. And then 6 to 7 months into the startup, one of the founders leaves. It left a big hole in the company in terms of its plan, its ability to effectively deliver on its timeline to the friends and family. It affected their ability to raise institutional capital. They had to hire somebody else to replace that, and they had to issue more equity. The issue was, though, that the founder who was already issued his shares, who left, didn't have to give up any of those shares, even though he had an early departure. A second situation that we sometimes run across is one in which there is specific roles that have been identified by each of the founders, and there's detailed requirements for vesting tied to the underlying stock for achieving the specific deliverables or objectives for that founder. It could be a product launch, it could be a certain amount in sales, it could be a certain number of customers. What ends up happening, though, especially for substantive milestone-based vesting requirements that take place over a period of years, is that the objectives of the company change. Sometimes the roles of the founders change. Sometimes there's a pivot to emphasize a different component of a business model that makes the original plan and tied to vesting milestones no longer work as efficiently and requires then subsequent amendments. So we had one company that we work with that went through, for each of the founders, 7 sets of amendments associated with the vesting requirements. So it ended up being very expensive and time-consuming to recalibrate and re-identify the new milestones for the founders to keep that structure in place. The third example I will give is using an atypical duration of a vesting schedule. So we had a situation, and actually this has come up a few times, where founders come to us and say they've been working on this idea for a number of years, and it doesn't make sense for them to effectively have a typical 4-year vesting schedule. So they end up requiring only a 1-year or 2-year vesting time period for the underlying shares. So we implement that structure, and come the institutional investment round, the investors look at the details, and there may be 6 months or a year left on the vesting schedules. And what investors will typically ask for then is a revesting of the underlying stock. So what they initially intended to effectively give credit for a number of years of work prior to the startup being formed, they end up having to revest the entirety of their stock for the entire 4 years, because once the underlying issue is opened up for negotiation, the investors are usually successful, requiring very long durations of a revesting period. So what we consider as the best practice, generally speaking, is to have a typical 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff. It's pretty common among vesting of founder stock as well as stock options. And then occasionally have some level of differentiation for unique situations, but try to limit the number of purposes of those deviations and stick to the core common 4-year vesting schedule. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Thanks.